Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk. Today's live stream is going to start a little bit early, 3:30, because tonight I am presenting with Millennial Mike at Olympia REI meetup. So if you're in the area, hope to see you there. The topic, can you retire with $500,000, comes from a question from Jay. Jay says, Dion, I know you always talk about the time component, but what about folks who have $500,000 today and want to replace their income with rentals? Lots of people sitting in cash now. My response was, that's a great question. I'll make a video on it this week. And here we are, a week later. Have I mentioned I'm lazy? If this is your first time to my channel, welcome. My name is Dion. I'm the lazy investor. I reached financial freedom in about a decade investing in buy and hold real estate. I started from a really bad position, a single parent with 3 kids, laid off from law enforcement, started teaching at a CDL school making $17 an hour, and found out about $89,000 in bad debt in my name I didn't know existed until the divorce. I knew the divorce existed. I knew it was coming. And I made work completely optional in about a decade, retired in 2022, and now I'm actually struggling with, how do you spend money? The decade of discipline it took to get to financial freedom is not a habit that is easily broken. So the question today but what about folks who have $500,000 today and want to replace their income with rentals? Lots of people sitting in cash flow now. And Jay says, I know you always talk about the time component. And for the people who like the actual answer in less than a minute, here you go. It's still the time component, Jay. That's the problem. So let's go through the hypothetical here. What have I invested in a decade to reach financial freedom? $320,000. From cash flow from rentals, I also invested about $300,000. So all in, I'm $620,000, 320 from my W-2 over a decade, 300,000 from rentals over a decade. But if you have $500,000 to deploy today, it would seem like the math says, if it takes X number of rentals to reach financial freedom, can't you just acquire them quicker? So I house hacked my first duplex. Because of the bad debt to income ratio, what I really did is move from my house into an apartment, rented my house out for 2 years to get rental income on my tax returns so that I can get around the debt to income ratio, and then went to buy a duplex. It was a 5% down owner occupied duplex where my down payment was basically $15,000 plus some closing costs. So I'm $15,000 in. And then the next duplex was around $60,000 down and then $72,000 down. And so my down payments came up to what I have invested in real estate to reach financial freedom. Since then, I've purchased a house all cash, so I'm significantly more into this, but I might do a cash out refinance because sometimes I do stupid things like recycle capital. And if you're watching, Beth, jump in anytime. Surprise guest. So it was 2 years I got laid off from law enforcement, was working at the CDL school. So for 2 years, I worked in the new industry teaching people how to drive CDL trucks. That made me bankable. 2 years of saving the down payment, 2 years of working on credit score, all of the things that it took to get that first duplex, and then 2 years to get the next one. So it seems like it would go faster with the 500,000. But here's the problem. The first year we acquire a rental property, even though we calculate the yield, and this came from a members only live stream the other day. Fuzzy math is okay. We don't run the numbers to know how much we're going to make. We run the numbers to know if we're looking at 5 different properties, which is the one we should pursue, or should we not pursue any of them? But it's not to get an exact amount, right? One of the examples is, what is yield or cash flow? Look, so if you're using the 1% rule, I'm sorry, I say that it is flawed and outdated and nobody should be using it. There are some markets where you can use it to narrow down if you have a lot of properties to look at, but with today's inventory shortage, is there anybody out there who's trying to filter through hundreds of properties to find the best deal of hundreds of properties that would cash flow? If you are, good job. You're probably investing in a war zone. So I use the yield method. What is my cash on cash return, which is annual profit divided by cost to acquire? Cost to acquire is not just your down payment. Like I said, it was around $15,000 for that first duplex, but it was $15,000 closing costs. I needed money for immediate repairs. There weren't very many. And you need money in reserves. right? So that's not a part of the cost to acquire, but you have to save that money to buy those properties. So down payment, closing costs, money for immediate repairs, cost to acquire. Annual profit is all of the income, money that's coming in from all of the sources from that property. Now, usually for me, that's just rent, but some people charge for parking. I do have one place where they pay for a storage shed. Some people have shared paid laundry. There's probably other ways to make money off of your properties that isn't running a brothel, but I haven't looked into that yet. And all of the money that's coming in minus your expenses. Now, a lot of people say PITI, but it's actually from Lumberjack Landlord, PITI. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, right? You want to take out your mortgage, but your expenses, and expenses includes capital expenses, maintenance, repairs, money for vacancy. So how much are you setting aside from gross rents out of every month? That is part of your expenses, even though it's future costs. We set that aside to figure out the yield. So what's left after we take out the PITI is our monthly profit times that by 12 gets us our annual profit. Divide annual profit by cost to acquire. That'll get you a percentage. Sometimes a negative one, because not all deals are cash flow positive. Not all deals are good. And let me know in the comments if you want to know why I would buy a rental property with a 5% cash on cash return over top of a savings account that required no work that got a guaranteed 10% return. So we run the yield to figure out how much the property is going to make. But again, this is fuzzy math. We don't know exactly what our repairs are going to cost. We don't know exactly how long it's going to take to screen, place, and maintain a tenant. We don't know what our actual closing costs are going to be or what we're going to find during inspection that might adjust things in our favor if we find things we can negotiate. We're looking to see which is the property worth pursuing, like the best one out of the 5 or 10 or 20 that you're looking at. Or 2. Sometimes it's 2. Pick number 2. So cash on cash return or yield. I thought if I invest for 10 years and I save for 2 years between each one, now what happens at around the 5 and 6 year mark is the income snowball starts to kick in. People who have researched stocks understand the compound interest effect. With real estate, it is compounding streams of income, right? Your W-2 might increase. You might find overtime, develop a side hustle. Each rental property that is producing rent increases your streams of income. But here's what happens over those 10 years and why it took 10 years, even though I, for the first 8, never made more than, well, the 8th year I made $61,000, but every year before that was less than 60. Last 2, made decent money. Save for 2 years, buy the first duplex. Save for 2 years and buy the next duplex. Well, when we buy the next duplex at the 4 year mark, that first duplex had 2 years of rent increases all the way down to the 10th year. So at 10 years, if I got one every other year, which was my plan starting out, I would have 10 years of real estate ownership, investing because that's saving for 2 years, but one duplex has 8 years of rent increases, appreciation, principal pay down, all the tax benefits. The next property has 6 years and then 4 years, right? So that's why 10 years made it possible. I didn't save up all my money and at 10 years go buy a property. Like the person today who has the 500,000 who could go down, house hack a duplex, put down payments on other properties, depending on how your debt to income ratio works. And if you've ever had rentals, if you have rental properties, it's a lot easier because those first 2 years is kind of a barrier. Lenders like to see that you've had properties for at least 2 years, knowing that you can manage a property, find and keep tenants, show profit. Then debt to income means almost nothing. But when you first start, that 500,000 doesn't mean that you can go out, put $100,000 aside for reserves, house hack a duplex for maybe $50,000 down, because $35,000 down on a FHA loan would get you $1 million property. And then go and buy another duplex with $100,000 down and $100,000 down. So you'd have 3 duplexes and house hack a duplex and reserves, right? It doesn't work that way because the lenders won't let you get that much in debt that fast without having a proven track record of having rentals. So for those first 2 years, you want to acquire, my goal would be a house hack, right? Reduce or eliminate your biggest expense. For most people, that's housing. If you have $500,000 saved, your biggest expense might be taxes. So let's eliminate housing or reduce housing with a house hack. And then if your debt to income will allow, which means how much credit card, bad debt do you have? What kind of student loans do you have? What kind of car payments or toy payments for RV, boat, quads, those kind of things are you looking at compared to your income? Can you acquire a rental property? If you can, I would acquire 2 of them. If not, I would acquire the house hack for those 2 years. At the 2-year mark, now that you have rental income, that's where the house hack comes in, whether it's a house with an ADU, so 2 houses on one property. My friends lived in an RV and rented their house out, right? So the house was a house hack because they were living in an RV. You can buy a duplex, triplex, or fourplex. Right now, it's only 5% down with conventional lending. And Frank, you have a question on DSCR. I have some answers for you. So it's even if you have the $500,000 today, it might be 2 years before you can acquire the 3rd or 4th property, even though you have the money to put down and the down payment. With conventional lending, where your debt to income ratio is involved. So then at the 2-year mark, you would hopefully continue to save between now and then, have more to invest. And at the 2-year mark, you would buy 1 or 2 more properties, depending on how much you had to put down. Now, debt to income ratio isn't going to matter on conventional loans, which has the lowest down payment and the best interest rate, right? Pay attention, Frank. This is the drawback to the DSCR loans. So 5% down on house hacks, somewhere between usually 10 or 25% down on a small multifamily, not house hack. There are lenders who will do less than 20% down on a non-owner occupied property. So there, you probably can't hear that on the thing. The ferry has got like that we call them the A-team when they run the horn for 30 seconds straight. So even if you have the money now, there's a delay for those 2 years, and you need the 2 years to stabilize the properties. What if you buy properties that need a little bit of work and you have to place a tenant? Might take a month or 3, depending on permit process, to get the work done. Might take a month to get a tenant in there. So you're 1 to 4 months before you have income from that property. And starting right away, knowing your strategy and your market, what is the fair market rent for the properties you're looking at? What is happening with Section 8? Because an example is in Section 8 in 2024 in my area saw a significant increase. I think it's over 20% increase to what they were paying. I haven't actually done the math. I should do the math. I'm not good at math. But that doesn't mean all rents in January 2024 went up. It means about halfway through the year of 2024, the Section 8 increase will impact non-Section 8 tenants and drive up all rents later in the year. So there's all of these things to where in that first year, even though you could deploy the funds, it's not going to turn into immediate cash flow. So as you worded the question, I know I often talk about the time component, right? The thing that people don't like to hear is that, yeah, there are people like the financial firefighter or Cody who go out and acquire a bunch of rental properties in their first 2 years, empty out their retirement accounts, use creative financing, whatever their strategy was. But even Mark Ashiro has said he kind of feels like he grew too fast and had some evictions and some tenant turnovers and some rehabs going on. That doesn't mean you can immediately retire. So even with $500,000 to deploy, my opinion, you're looking at a minimum of 5 years to make work optional. You could buy a couple of properties all cash with no mortgages, so you'd have higher cash flow, terrible return on your money, and create enough money to live that very frugal life. And I want people to understand this. And hopefully the chat is not full of your sound's not working. It hasn't been working the whole time. No, okay. If you had to be frugal to be retired, I would still be working. Right? I talked at the very beginning of this video about how I retired in 2022, and one of the challenges that I'm having is learning how to spend money, becoming comfortable with spending money. And Millennial Mike and I will talk about this often. We'll actually maybe even mention it tonight while we're presenting at the Olympia REI group, is that the moment we felt rich was when we actually got a soda with our meal at a restaurant, right? Because it's 4 or 5 times the cost of a soda at your house. And you're at a restaurant where you're probably paying for your date or your kids, and you're already spending enough money. So that's not the goal. Switch forward to 10 years later, retired. I have what are called reverse budgets. I require myself to spend $1,000 a month eating out. And yes, there might be a time when I do rehabs or do, something with one of my properties where I have a big expense and I go, hey, this month I'm going to cut back just because. But for the most part, my goal is to expend at least that much I have a set amount I want to spend on my vehicle. I want to spend more months traveling out of the US than in the US this year, right? So I'm learning how to do that. But that is because I had those 10 years of discipline to put the money to work to reach financial freedom. And it did take a full 10 years. So the $500,000 to deploy now, Jay, would mean you could do it in I would think about half the time, but you still have some barriers to time, stabilizing, proving yourself to lenders. So here's the alternate approach. And to get to also include old guy REI's question, Frank. What about DSCR loans, right? Doesn't count against the 10 in your name. Doesn't look at your income, doesn't look at your salary. Here's what it does do. It looks at your credit score. So you do need to have a credit score. Often it requires a higher down payment. Most DSCR loans require an LLC, not all. Some hard money requires an LLC, but not all. So you can do those in your own name, but even if they're in your own name or in an LLC, they don't count against your 10 conventional loans in your name because those 10 have to be Fannie Freddie backed. DSCR loans aren't, which is why they have a higher interest rate. In 90% of the years, there was a dip in 2022 at the beginning when rates were starting to go up really fast. They did that inchworm effect where they went above DSCR rates for a couple of months and everybody was thinking it was like some stock market reverse, what is it? Inverted curve that they always talk about that I don't even want to know what it means. That's why I invest in real estate. You don't have to know stuff. Because man, have I got myself qualified in not knowing stuff. So Jay, I hope that answers your question. I'm going to spend the rest of this live stream answering all of the questions in the chat. My live streams are every Tuesday afternoon, 4 p.m. Pacific. Except for today, I started 30 minutes early because I have to get to an event tonight. And I get to see, I want to say friend, because you can't say best friend because we're not 12, but my friend, Millennial Mike, presenting with me tonight. The topic is actually out-of-state investing versus local investing. And if you want to see a defensive tactics instructor and a SWAT officer go at it, I would be the first recorded death at a real estate event because Mike would wipe the floor with me. But we can debate out-of-state versus local, and we'll talk about several other things too. So if you're in the area, hope to see you there. I have a guest who should be joining me soon, unless I got a chat text saying she can't get in. Nope. I got somebody who wants to buy my property, which is the address of the place I worked at 3 years ago. I should sell it to him. Okay. The intros to my live streams, I usually try to go for 10 minutes. So 28 minutes. I didn't mess it up too bad. To give people a chance to get questions into the comments, because this is where you really help the people around you. You might be wondering, like Frank and Cynthia saying, oh, we should look into DSCR loans. They absolutely make sense. Doesn't count against the 10 in your name. It doesn't look at your income, your debt to income ratio, your salary, which is your income. In the dictionary under redundant, it says see redundant. And you ask the question about the DSCR loan, and there's other people out there going, oh, wait, there are other options. I didn't know about that, right? I was living in my house. I had a bad debt to income ratio. I went to the lender and they said, actually, you can't borrow any money. And this is the joke my dad always said. I still miss you, Dad. He said, a bank will tell you you can't borrow money because you need it. But DSCR loans, while they look at your credit score, they look at how the property performs. So if you're finding properties that perform well, DSCR is actually an option, but higher interest rate and higher down payment is the thing that would have stopped me in my tracks. Howdy, Beth.
Hello, howdy. Good to see you.
Same here.
It's been a minute, like a week.
It has because it's been all the way since Vegas.
I know. Yeah.
Beth Traverso, I always get the titles wrong here. It's a nationwide rated 1%, top 1% realtor and investor who has reached financial freedom, in my mind, a couple of times over, but continues to work because you're broken.
I am broken. I concede that. I can learn a lot from you, Dion. So
I am trying to make
reasons why I like, one of many reasons I like hanging out with you.
One lazy person at a time.
Yeah. It's inspiring. Yeah.
I really enjoyed meeting your husband.
Yeah,
he reminds me of all of the good qualities of my family.
Good.
None of the bad ones. So that was cool.
Yeah.
So The question today that I started the video with was, I often talk about, it takes 10 years to invest. You don't have to make a lot of money. It does take discipline, and it does take, saving and putting money to work. But somebody asked the question, if you had $500,000 to start now, how long would it take to retire? And I broke it down where it'd go faster than 10 years, but there are some barriers that would still make it take a while.
Yeah. Are
If
you,
somebody was starting today and they had 500,000, how would you tell them to start?
well, okay, I hope you're not asking me to do math.
No, 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 no
Although
math
I
for the
can
videos.
calculate 3% inflation, so test me on that.
There you
But
go.
but I would say yes, it can be done, but it's gonna take a little while still. If I had 500,000 seed capital, I would definitely start with a house hack. Um, I think that's the best way to get in with the smallest down payment, and you can have others offset your expense, and you can save the difference, like money that we would be spending on housing. You can save that toward your next one. You can buy an owner occupied, and probably it depends on your debt to income and other things, but you might be able to buy some more non-owner occupied, a single family home to a fourplex or so. I would keep it within the conventional guidelines, probably.
Yeah, and if there's anybody that's new here, whenever we talk about this, we usually talk about up to 4 units. And
Hmm.
that's because of the 30-year fixed rate debt. There are some options, Frank, for your question. One of the other benefits to DSCR, and why I considered it for a while, is a lot of the lenders, like Convoy Home Loans, will go up to 8 units with a DSCR loan with 30-year fixed rate debt, right? I don't want adjustable rate. I don't want a loan reevaluation period. I don't want anything where I have to think of a balloon payment or something to lose sleep over 5 or 10 years from now. I want 30-year fixed rate debt, and as much as I can get, and I don't want to pay it off early. Like there's actually been a couple questions that came in this week of, hey, should I pay my house off? It's at this. And every single time I come up with a reason why it doesn't make sense.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean there isn't a time it makes sense, right? If you're post-retirement,
Yeah.
stabilization phase, not trying to grow, don't worry
Yeah.
about generational wealth or leaving
Hmm.
something to a charity. Sure,
Right.
it can make sense to make a bad financial decision and pay down your good debt.
Yeah. Now you can, if you were owner occupying a 1 to 4 unit, you can, I checked with my preferred lender because guidelines are constantly changing. But with the 5% down conventional guidelines, they will allow 75% of the income from the other 3 units, for example, if you live owner occupying a fourplex. So you can do 5% down and use 75% of that other income to help you qualify. So it's actually a really great product that was
It,
not previously available.
It is, and that one that came out November 18th of last year also removed the self-sustainability requirement, which was the property would have to basically pay 1.1 or whatever. Each lender was a little different percent of what it was. So if your mortgage was 1,000, your rents would have to be 1,100, right? It's real simple
Hmm.
math, but it's usually way more than that for a
Yeah.
fourplex. It's not a part of this. They're literally trying to doing the wrong thing. They're saying there's extremely limited supply. Let's pour some diesel on the fire of demand and
I
see what
know.
happens.
Yeah. In my area, I wish there were more small multiplexes. I'd be all over that. But they almost don't exist in my little rural corner of the world. So it hasn't had any impact on the market here, other than those are always in high demand, and now it's just even more high demand. But
Right. The thing that it does, and so one of the reasons why a lot of people are watching the crash bow videos and looking at, there's a reason I should wait. 2020 eviction moratorium, then forbearance was ending, then rates went up, and there's all these reasons that people have missed out on 45% appreciation in the last 3 years. That added to it, right? So owning, what did I have at the time? Six small multifamily properties and one single family house at the time when that went into effect, all of the values went up, right? Like the richening continues if you're the person who owns the asset that's impacted by inflation.
yeah.
Meaning, stop waiting. Don't rush. Anybody telling you to rush should be blocked. Anybody telling you to wait should block, because there are two things that tell you when to buy, and that's, are you ready? And did you find a great deal? That has nothing to do with the market.
Right. And in the market always is bad for that. As somebody who's getting to be on the older side of things and having been in real estate since 1995, There's never been a time when it hasn't been. There's been some narrative going that entire time about why it's a bad time to buy real estate.
Every
Meanwhile, prices are, I don't know, when they started are now 10 times that, so
yeah,
I would
it's a
say you
I
at
want to
some
say it's
point you have
almost
to
an
take a bit of a leap of faith and get in or don't, just decide, are you ever going to own or not?
yeah, it's almost an unbalancing concept when you think about what's happened to the equity of the properties that you've owned for a while. Even if you bought them in 2008,
Yeah.
right? What happened to that? I bought a property in 2000 with an adjustable rate mortgage. It had all
Mm-hmm.
of the problems that everyone else did during the crash. And that property is the one I made the mistake of paying off, but it's now rented to Section 8 for over $2,500 a month with no mortgage on it. And I think it's about 4.5 times the value of what I paid.
Mm-hmm.
So
The house I'm sitting in right now, I bought with toxic debt. We've talked about this before. I had four different ways I was going to pay off that toxic debt, and they all blew up at the same time. But I bought in March of 2000, April, maybe 2007, which was right about maybe 3 months before the actual peak in the Seattle area. And they went down for about 5 years after that. So, but however, now here we are. I'm still here. Obviously, I didn't lose a house, although it was scary for a while there. Um, and the value has gone up multiple, multiple, I don't know, maybe three plus fold, even in that 10-year loss. There's 10 years lost almost of equity decline and then the gain to get back to where I was.
when you purchased that, was that where you live or was that a rental?
No, it's where I live. Yeah, I bought it as
Okay.
an owner. Like the first house I bought, like just like, hey, I'm buying this house just for us and our family, not thinking of it as an investment property. Just this is where we're going to live. This is where I was pregnant at the time. This was I'm with our first, and this is where we're going to raise our kids, and we have. So um, it all worked out in the end. But yeah, that was some scary times. But if you just are able to ride it out and don't do toxic debt, I'll never do that again, even if it's just temporary.
Yeah, I think the only time it makes sense. So when somebody says I'm investing and making an appreciation play, or when somebody says I'm buying with an adjustable rate mortgage or with a balloon payment or something, both of those are fine. If a person has a large portfolio that generates the cash flow to handle that blowing up in your face and you not caring,
Yeah. If
right?
you can do that, then fine. I wasn't out in that position at the time, but yeah. And I have bought a couple, like some seller financing ones in the recent last 2, 3 years where there is a 10-year term on it. But I decided, you know what? I can refinance at that point. I can sell. There's any number of things I could do at that time. So
In the chat, old guy REI is talking a little bit about people not expecting you to be so tall. It's because you sit in like a slouched chair when you're on Zoom. So we all expected you to be my height. Jared
I'm
asks for
sure.
kitchen countertops. Do any of you use quartz? I'm worried about stains and temperature. I know they stain and then heat resistance, but tenants will probably put hot pot on it or spill tea or coffee. What kind of countertops do you prefer?
Quartz. What was the question? Quartz or what?
Does anybody use quartz?
Yes, quartz all the time. You
Okay.
don't have to do, there's different qualities of quartz. So it's about the same price as quartz is not super expensive anymore. You don't have to go with the premium quartz. In a rental, I wouldn't. But we go with basic quartz. It's usually a white with a little bit of, I forget what they call it. It kind of looks like marble. And we get it at the same place where all the flippers shop for their cabinets and countertops, and they come install it. And it's relatively inexpensive. But then again, you got to take into account where your property is and what grade it is, A, B, C. It may not make sense to put the quartz in there from a cost effective point of view. I'm always thinking about potential resale in the future too. The realtor me can't help but do that. So I just know if I do this once, then I'm good and I don't have to um think about replacing it if we ever sell. It's going to be ready to sell.
So I'm one of those weird investors that buys rent-ready or already occupied properties. I have a couple that have quartz. Most of them have like the laminate I don't get any more money for the one that has quartz
No.
and slow close cabinets than I do for the one that has laminate. So in Class C areas, it doesn't have an impact. In
Hmm.
Class B, it can make a huge difference if you have a $700 refrigerator or a $2,500 refrigerator. That can actually matter for
Right.
your rentability.
Yeah. And
Um,
if I was, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. If I was not remodeling the kitchen, then I wouldn't bother. If the kitchen is fine as it is, I wouldn't bother. We do have rentals with laminate that I have no intention of. Those are the ones that came with the tenants in it, and they're perfectly fine and happy with what they've got. And then, or the ones, we have one house where the tenants have been there for, I don't know, 12, 13 years, and they're fine with their laminate countertops. But if they ever left and we wanted to give it a facelift a little bit to raise the rent significantly, I might consider it. It's usually about $4,000 or so to put the quartz in, more or less. Depends on the
so
size of the kitchen, of course.
where I'm at, I did new countertops and new cabinets. It's the first time, right? I've done it with friends at their place, and got the cabinets through Matt, through the lumberjack landlord, right? Really, really high quality cabinets, probably higher quality than I needed for a rental, but through his program, it was about the same cost as the average set that I could have got. And then I'm doing butcher block. And
Yeah.
I had Martin Properties, Josh and Mary came over the other day because they did it at their house. And I tried the lacquer, whatever you call it, um, the pour on stuff.
Oh, okay.
Don't like it, not a fan.
Mm,
So I'm actually going to turn it over and just do, if I can find food grade polyurethane stain.
yeah.
And because all in, doing it here myself, I'm less than $400 for all the cabinets, all the countertops done in the unit.
Yeah, that's definitely a lot more cost effective. I wonder, how does the butcher block hold up to
Matt has them in all his,
careless
not all, but a
tenants?
lot of his rentals. And for Class C, I think so. I used to work. I was a furniture mover a long time ago, one of my truck driving jobs, and you probably remember around here Levitt's.
Oh,
And then I
yeah.
went to the Bon, which was the Bon
Yeah.
Macy's. Now it's Macy's, right? So delivered their furniture, and they would have these tables, couches, chairs that all kind of looked like butcher block, right? Stained really nice. Well, if it got a chip or damaged or whatever, you'd literally go to the warehouse and they'd grab a hammer
Mm.
and they'd smash it in a random pattern all over and call it antiqued. So
Distressed. Yeah.
I'm gonna distressed, right? I'm gonna put this in as butcher block, nice
Yeah.
and shiny and new. And then if a tenant messes it up, puts the hot stain on there with circles, I'll probably get something hot and do a pattern
Yeah.
design of stains or circles.
And really,
Very
nobody's
easy
gonna care. Yeah.
because no one's gonna
Renters,
care, right? It's
renters
not
really don't
the,
care.
the three things the three things I go for is safe, clean, functional.
Hmm.
Right? If
Yeah.
you're in Class B or high end rentals, that's not the case.
Yeah. And there are some finishes that will really seal that wood. I know I've got a conference table in my office that's basically a giant slab of live edge cedar. I'm pretty sure it's cedar or fir. I can't recall which, but um the guys that finished it up, they put some sealer on there, and I said, "Is this gonna hold up to coffee cups and all that stuff?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, it will." And I'll be darned. I mean, it holds up fantastic.
Nice.
It's nothing will harm that. So it's just nice, like satiny finish too. So I don't know what it is they put on there. I could find out if you ever need to know, but it really does the trick. So these are
Yeah,
like the
if you could find out,
professional
that'd be great
treehouse
because I'm
guys,
I'm
the
doing
Nelson treehouse people. I don't know if you know them, but anyway, they know wood and like how to seal wood. So anyway, I made a note to myself to find out what that is that they're putting on there because it feels like there's almost nothing on it, but it's really durable. So anyway,
no, you'll have to let me know because I'm doing that. Actually, I think I'm leaving tomorrow morning. What is today? Tuesday. No, I'm leaving Thursday morning, driving over Eastern Washington and back. So as soon as I get back, I'll be doing that to the butcher block that I have here.
okay, I'll ask.
Jason asked a question. If Section 8 tenants' rent is 100% covered by Section 8, would I just binder Section 8? Do you have any Section 8 tenants?
No, I
Okay,
can't speak to that.
fair enough. So I keep about 1/3 of my properties with the Section 8 program. And Jason, in the free binder course, which you can find at Dion Talk, which one of the mods might put in the chat, it's free, so there's no hidden charge or anything. There's actually a section on how does this work with Section 8. And here's the Cliff Notes version. You don't have a lease with Section 8. So even if they're paying 100%, they're not your tenants. You have a lease with your tenant, the occupant of the property, and you have a contract with Section 8. The contract has to be agreed to by Section 8 on an agreed upon lease between you and the occupant. So you binder strategy the tenant. This can be through email, text, or I like to do it in person, and use the actual binder from if you saw the talk in the Real Estate Rookie Show, the updates are using Section 8's increase because it was a big increase in my area, basic allowance for housing, what they'll pay. Show the tenant, here is what Section 8 is willing to pay. And for my tenant, when her rent went up, I showed Millennial Mike, he was here, I had the letter. No, it's not here anymore. The tenant's portion went down like $400 or $500, even though the rent was an increase, because they do a reevaluation of the tenant at the time of the contract signing. So just because their rent increases doesn't mean their out-of-pocket part is always going to go up. But explaining it to the tenant, getting a lease in place, and then you send the lease to Section 8 saying, the tenant and I have agreed to this amount. Here is the printout of fair market rents from your website on what you'll go up to. Here's the comps in the area that I use, same number of bedrooms. Remember, they only look at bedroom count, no amenities like garage, carport, pool, hot tub, or anything like that. It's just how many bedrooms does it have. Then you find the comps that are at or above the amount that you have agreed to with the tenant. And then Section 8, for me, has agreed every time. Do the work for them so that they can go to their boss and say, here's why we're agreeing to this, because our amount says this, here's the comps in the area. The easier you make it for them, the more likely it is to go in your favor. Jason, I know how to do Section 8. I'm just guessing if it's covered by Section 8, the binder. Thanks, Chester. There you go. Keep going. I keep seeing ads on Instagram about people renting homes and then renting to a bunch of people. Anyone nervous about that? So a scam where you rent the house out to several applicants. The worst scam, the one that concerns me, and I've actually covered a couple of videos how to protect yourself from this, is people fall for this. They actually fall for this. I have real life experience where this has happened to somebody. They list it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. It's not their property. Usually Zillow or apartments.com will have a phone call conversation to confirm. Still can probably be faked. But they'll take pictures of your listing on your rental, show it as their own, and tell people this is the thing they fall for. I'm traveling out of the country. I'll give you half a month's off rent. Just pay your deposit in the first half of the month's rent. When you get there, change the locks. It's not their property. And my friend who went through this, luckily he was Airbnb-ing his property. There was a tenant in place when the other tenant showed up saying, I've just rented this place, I'm moving in. So they didn't get to establish residency because they were obviously scammed. So I've made videos on what I do is I go to Canva, canva.com. It's a free site. There's a paid version with more fancy stuff, but I just use the basic. That's how I make my thumbnails. But I'll take a photo of my property, and then I will put a watermark of my email and phone number all over the pictures, making it harder for the person to take my photos and make their own listing, because you just don't want to be low-hanging fruit.
Yep, I had that happen to me multiple times. And these are the people who have ruined Craigslist. So thanks a lot. It seems like that's where they do it more than anywhere, is on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace now. But we've had people call from, I had something over there with my name on it. I can't remember if it was some sort of a sign or something in front of this rental house of ours. And somebody called and they said, hey, I'm confused because I see this. And then I see this other, I've been talking to this other person who said the rent was, I don't know what it was significantly less than what the actual rent is. That's the other thing. If it feels like the rent is too good to be true and they can't meet you in person, it's a scam. And I think most people know that by now. Almost everybody by now knows, but because it's been around for at least 10 years, but unfortunately people are still falling for it. But they gave us the number of the person that was said that they were the owner, and then Mark called him, and that was an interesting conversation. And anyway, and then it stopped after that.
People fall for scams all the time.
Yeah.
my brother's been on my channel a few times. I respect my brother, hard worker, he's a tree worker, he's retired, he's got 10 paid off rentals, right? Absolutely respect him. He's been retired now for like 9 years, and he's traveling side by sides, quads, sea-doos, doing all the fun stuff. But he's not a social media guy, right? So he's kind of on Facebook because his kids put him on there. And he messages me the other day. And have you ever seen the chats where it's if you're a girl, it's some guy, and if you're a guy, it's some girl, and it says, "Your posts are so interesting. I can't ask you to be my friend, but will you friend request me?"
Right.
He messages me and he goes, "Who's this really hot girl that's messaging you?" And I'm like, "I don't
Oh
know. She sounds
no.
interesting. You should click on it." Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, people are still
You
there
should
is
connect with her
an
on
audience for
WhatsApp.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
WhatsApp. That's the other clue.
Booger Fart Boy asks, where can you find the property tax info as well as the house insurance to help calculate yield? I have an answer, but I'm interested to hear what like an actual professional would say. So
Yeah, I have the cheat sheet for the MLS has this back end called Realist where we get all the great tax info. We can search it in a million different ways. It's really easy. Most people don't have that. You can just Google your county assessor's office or tax records, parcel records, whatever the case may be, and it will pop up with a search. So you can search that way. Um, is that how you do it?
so yes, I would actually contact the county tax assessor's office and say, what equation do you use to calculate the insurance, or not the insurance, the taxes? And note that it's not based on what the sale of the property is going to be. It's going to be based on what they evaluate the improvements to the property to be. So
Yeah,
it's
some
a little bit
states
of
may
an
be different on that. I think there's other states where, like, I think California is based upon your purchase price, but I don't know. I've never owned property in
well,
California.
it'll Prop 13 says it can adjust at point of purchase, but it's still the county tax assessor's assessed value, which is based on the improvements of the property. Your purchase will cause an impact to change it, and then so you're right. Each state is different. That's why you call your county tax assessor and ask them what equation that they use.
And they have a thing, it's called a mill rate, and yeah, there is a formula to it based upon what the assessment is. Sometimes when you purchase, I know at least where we are, like you purchase at a higher price point, then all of a sudden, like they're coming around and they're reevaluating and they're going to reassess it higher
Yep.
potentially.
Yep, and you can find comps and go and argue. My brother's done it a few times, argue the county taxes down. When they lowered my taxes a couple of years ago, I didn't go and argue them back up. So,
Here's the
uh,
thing, even when you win, you lose when you do that. At least I did. So when I purchased my commercial building in Fall City where my office is, I got a wonderful deal on it. And it was assessed for quite a bit higher than I purchased it for. And it was listed on the open market. It's not like that was market value. So I contested it and I won. And my bill was dropped about half. But then I had a target on me ever since then. And that assessor was just on me constantly. We were remodeling the building and stuff too. So he's all like, what are you doing now? What about this? What about that? Driving by, taking pictures, sending me things in the mail, fill this out. And they on me constant. Are you done with your remodel yet? What's going on? You know, and then they just jacked it up to where now the taxes are, I don't know, 300% what they were when I had just first bought it. And I really, really wish I had just kept my mouth shut and not said anything. So
so if
maybe
you're
someone
doing a
else will have a better
remodel or a
experience,
property
but
improvement,
what's
if you're
that?
doing if you're doing a property improvement like that, I would probably not do it too. What my brother did was bought mobile homes on acreage.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really changing much outside.
Yeah. And they spy on you with satellites now where they can go, hey, we saw you're doing this, or, you know, like stay. I know. It gets me going because I'm in a property, it's like surrounded by trees and nobody can see down the driveway. It's like I don't want to be, you know, it's not quite get off my land, but for certain people it is. It's like I just want to be you're
So, and
welcome,
when you own
Dion,
your
and others
house,
are friends of our friends, welcome, you know, tax assessor, no, thank
not
you.
welcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're when you live there, it sucks. When it's a rental, what sucks is the tenants pay the property taxes.
I know.
So every time that they vote in an increase, that's who's impacted. And
Yeah.
the last, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking, you know, we just got our tax bills in the mail and our new assessments are out. And interestingly, even though the assessments dropped quite a bit because they overshot it in my area a year or two ago, it went way high before, and then the market corrected, and then they're like, oh, wait. So they reduced it. But interestingly enough, the taxes still went up. So, because it's not directly based on the assessment, it's based on the whole pie. They're like, this whole pie is going to get paid. And what your portion of the pie is might shift a little bit depending on some other things, but it has to equal 100% of the pie. It's kind of how it was explained to me.
And for the insurance, the second half of the question, I call and get quotes on a couple of different properties. And I basically get a feel because this is the thing that came up in the members only group the other night. We were literally, what we do in the members only meetings is we pull up an email, we look at a listing. This one was actually, Curtis has one under contract. So we went through, we reviewed the math, we reviewed the whole property, the elements of the area, the house hackability of it. Like we went through the whole deal. As soon as you know that the math is cash flow positive and the yield is better than the area average, right? This was, above 7 or 8% area average around here. We can kind of find fours. A lot of them are negative, but we can find fours. Stop thinking of math unless you find something that's a large expense that pops up. Then you might want to rerun the numbers, or if you found out your rents that you were calculating were wrong. Fuzzy math is okay. You're not trying to be exact. And so when it comes to something like what is your insurance going to be, I know based on several quotes that I can get single family house insurance for less than $600 a year and get duplex for less than $1,100 a year. This has doubled in like the last 3 years. It went up 80% last year. So there's significant increases, but paying attention to that, even a big swing, let's say your homeowner's insurance is $600 or $1,500. That's not even $100 a month difference, right? It's an amount, it's different. Where it really matters is if you're in somewhere like Florida, where the elevation or the year your house was built in can impact your flood insurance by somewhere between $1,000 and $8,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's significant.
Huge
Get several
wildfire
quotes.
risk is another thing. If you're out in the mountains and they can't get a fire truck up the road, you may not be able to get insurance. If somebody, I had one risk, so it seems like things kind of ebb and flow with the insurance drama, in my world. And there has been some lately where new policies after a sale, they go up quite a bit because they're reevaluating everything and it's not necessarily going to be at all what the previous owner paid. And we are seeing sometimes some pretty extreme differences in that, not Florida extreme, but it could be double, but still it's usually within $100 a month spread, so I would say if you really want to, you can talk to, I have an insurance broker I work with that shops all the different carriers, and I've worked with them for years at this brokerage. They do an amazing job finding the best rates for us. But you can call, you should have a relationship with somebody like that. And I think I prefer the broker because then it's not just what State Farm offers or farmers or what have you. You can be anybody, but, they'll let me know if, you can call and check and see, they can run the numbers, look at the clue report, like the claims report, etc. See what they can give you a quote pretty easily. So if it's something you're seriously considering and that makes a significant difference to you, then it's something that's pretty easy to do some due diligence on. It usually takes my guy, I don't know, an hour max to do that. So it's pretty fast turnaround. It just depends on how busy they are that day.
Yeah. And once you have a few quotes, for me, I would be comfortable using an estimate for the next
Yeah.
3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 3 months, I'd get a couple of quotes.
Yeah. If
See
it isn't
what's
a
shifting.
flood zone, that can vary a lot depending on a lot of different factors. If it's raised or not, is it 100-year floodplain or in the floodway, etc. So there are some factors with that can make a big difference in your cost. But, barring that, it's usually not too extreme, the spread and prices.
So for people wondering, you can actually go to something like Redfin, Realtor, Zillow. When you're looking at the map for a property, that's my last one. You can actually click where is the flood zone. It has a section to click flood.
Mm-hmm. keep in mind there, Redfin has a flood score that I think is almost criminally inaccurate because it does not reflect the FEMA floodplain at all. They're trying to sell flood insurance, and I swear, I don't know if that's still on there, but there was a lot of homeowners that were going to sue Redfin because people just assume that because it would say they're in a, I had one where they said it was extreme flood risk and it was on top of a hill where there was no water anywhere around, far from the floodplain, and everyone came in here like, why is this? So, we like the house, but we don't like the flood risk. And it's like this Redfin flood, I forget what they call it, flood wise or flood, some flood score. Just don't take that as anyone's word for anything. If they're trying to sell flood insurance, is what that is. So talk to your insurance broker about, is it in the FEMA floodplain? And there are ways you can check that. There's all sorts of online, there's like something like floodwise.gov or something. I'd have to find the site, guys. I haven't looked on it in a while, but I know for me, I can just easily click on the tab in the MLS where it just pops it up for me. But I know that there are sites out there where you can pull up those FEMA flood maps. So they're easily viewable.
In Washington, it really hasn't been too much of a problem. What I'm more worried about here is buying something that has a wetland or a green belt or something.
And those are on where we are now in King County, there's sensitive areas on every single property.
Yep.
Every single one. It's slopes or wetlands or both. And there's buffers around them depending on what class they are.
And you'll see it listed with a picture and they'll say perfect spot for an ADU. You're like, no,
that drives me crazy.
That's not real. You can't do it there.
I've sold 20-acre parcels of vacant land where you're barely 1 acre you could do anything with, and all the rest of it had to be left untouched. So
there is a super chat from Dividend Dave, or how I like to call him, the only guy who didn't come see me in Vegas.
Yeah, Dividend Dave.
If you send me $200,000, you'll be signed up to earn thousands in super chat, passive income guaranteed. #crypto.
Well, hey.
Send it all to him.
There you go. You got it made.
Sounds like a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Jared asked, thank you for that, Dave. Does anyone know if the new 5% down fourplex loan requires a W-2? In other words, can I use my rental income to purchase a fourplex? I have the 5% down. It falls under normal conventional loans, which means you can use your rental income. Do you have it on 2 years tax returns, and does it look consistent? It can't look like a hockey stick, and it has to be there for at least 2 years. If then, yes. If not, lender dependent. Right? Some will go down to 10 months. Some will want 1 year. Some will want 2 years. And what that one lender tells you will be totally different 2 months from now.
Mm-hmm. Constantly changing. But yes, you can. It's like any kind of self-employed, like I'm not a W-2. Everything I've ever bought was not with a W-2, so you can do it. It's just they're just gonna scrutinize it more. And it does have to be on your taxes. If it's not on your taxes, it doesn't count.
Right. What lender was I was talking to a lender. They were using I'll call him a friend. Illicit activities, income to qualify for a loan because it was on his taxes. Because that's the way the IRS code is. Dave will tell you. If you commit a crime and you profit from it, you have to report it to the IRS. So, John, Texas.
I'll learn that lesson. Yeah.
If you came into some cash in this lending environment, high rates, would you buy a property, pay down off debt, or save the cash? So this is the question that's come up a few times, and I have about 7 minutes, and then I got to get out of here. So this might be, unless there's another question that pops up that we can get to. I'll get to Brandon's because it's a super chat. So John, Texas. I purchased a property all cash because I wanted to move the money out of the bank. I was tired of the FDIC insurance having to have a couple of banks. I might do a cash out refinance at the end. I don't like having paid off properties. There's a couple things. One, I'm only gaining appreciation on what I have invested. That's terrible. I only have the depreciation schedule against what I have invested. When you buy, here's the superpower of real estate that I don't have the mental capacity to put into words for people to understand. If you put $100,000 down on a $400,000 duplex, right? You're going to get let's say 10% cash on cash return. You're going to make $10,000 a year. That $100,000 invested being depreciated for 27 and a half years would mean you're going to pay some taxes. But that's not how it works. You put the $100,000 down on the $400,000 property, the value of the buildings, which is much more than $100,000, that amount is depreciated over 27 and a half years, allowing you to make more than a 10% return. Most of my properties are above 20% now and still never pay a penny in rental income tax, right? So I want the mortgage for the higher depreciation value, the higher appreciation value, because the bank doesn't get that. They took all the risks. I get the appreciation on that. Tenants will pay off the loan. If I have an issue with my insurance, it's me and a lender against the insurance company, not me against the insurance company. And the insurance company will work a lot better with you if they know you have a mortgage, because they know they're dealing with the legal team of a mortgage company that they're never going to reach out to and say, hey, we're going to interact with you. They just know that you have that in your back pocket. So I don't want it paid off. I have a video that came out a little bit ago, John, what I learned when I lost $1 million, because I paid off a house. At the time, I thought it made sense, and it has cost me $1 million paying that one off, because at the exact same time, I purchased a fourplex for a little less than what I paid off, and it's gone up in value over $1 million. I could have done two. So I don't want to pay off the debt. I would save the cash until I found a deal. Buying cash only if I was already financially free. That's the first one I did, because I didn't need increased cash flow. I wasn't worried about the yield. It's my first BRRRR. This is more of a, I moved here as quality of life than I did as an investment. I wanted to be on the water. I wanted to be walking distance to the ferries. I wanted to be, I'll call them restaurants, but there's 12 bars within walking distance of my house. So I would save if I was growing, and I would hunt for the next great deal that I would purchase with a mortgage. And then the super chat that came in from Brandon. Howdy. I've heard you say every tenant signs a lease, even if they move in at a later date. Do you require an additional deposit from the new roommate? No. I have it clear in the lease who paid the deposit. The new roommates, when they move in, have to qualify, right? Now, if they're going to sign a lease with the roommate and they're both on the lease, then they're co-signing, right? But if they're signing their own lease, like if they're going to rent a room, because I got a couple where it's a roommate situation, each person had to qualify.
Yeah, don't let somebody in that doesn't qualify, because I made that mistake once or twice over the years, and then the good one moved out and I got stuck with the bad one.
That's why I put them on a lease together, so it's a
Yeah.
co-sign. So if one moves out,
Yeah,
the
that's
other
the only
one
way to
leases
do
over
it.
too.
Seems obvious, but live and learn. So,
And we will be wrapping up there. Next live stream next Tuesday will be at the normal time, and as long as I survive this trip across the pass and back. If people want to reach out with questions, Beth, how can they get a hold of you?
yeah, I'm easy to find out there on social media, or they can go on my website, bethtraversogroup.com, and just send me a message there. And I personally see all those. So, yeah.
There is one last question I think is directed at you more than me, because I could live anywhere. Will Millennial Mike be in charge of booking lodging for next year's event?
If he is, I'm going to vet it first.
Right.
Just leave it at that.
Thank you, Mark, for that.
I've got too much to live for. Yeah.
I don't know.
Funny.
Something's got to take me out. That's how I think of everything.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Until
you,
my next
everybody.
video.
Thanks, Dion. Safe travels.
Ciao.